My father-in-law slid a bill across the table. Every dinner you've eaten here has a price. Pay up or leave. My wife looked away. I pulled out my wallet, took a long look, then said, "Don't worry. I'll pay you in full. Just not the way you expect." 3 weeks later, he got a call that left him screaming in the driveway. I met my wife, Natalie, in college. We were both quiet, not flashy. She was majoring in literature. I was working toward a degree in accounting. We bonded over simple things: late-night coffee runs, Sunday walks, old music. She was soft-spoken, never dramatic. I liked that. She didn't demand much. I had grown up with noise and coldness, so being around her calmed me. When I first met her parents, I thought they were just stiff. Her dad, Carl, worked in real estate and walked like he always had somewhere more important to be. Her mom, Diane, smiled a lot, but never said anything warm. Their home was one of those houses where nothing was out of place, not even a speck of dust. It looked like a photo in a magazine, but it felt like no one actually lived there. I thought maybe they were just reserved. Natalie assured me they were just old-fashioned. Over the years, I kept trying. I helped set up for Thanksgiving, brought wine to Christmas dinners, stayed late to help clean up. Carl always gave me this tight-lipped nod, like he was tolerating me. Never once said thanks. Diane would ask weird questions like, "Does your family celebrate holidays the proper way? Or you probably didn't grow up with fine things, did you?" Still, I stuck around. I loved Natalie. I told myself they didn't have to love me. After we got married, we went over to their house maybe once a month for dinner. Sometimes more around the holidays. Natalie always insisted. "It's important to keep the peace," she said. So we did. I'd come home tired from work. She'd be halfway dressed and already anxious. We'd go over, smile, sit through Carl's dry opinions on taxes or how men these days lack discipline, eat the food Diane reheated from a catering tray, and drive home in silence. No one ever asked me how my job was going. I don't think they even knew where I worked. 3 months ago, Carl invited us over for dinner again. Nothing unusual. Except this time, he asked if I could come early. I thought maybe he needed help moving furniture or something. When I got there, it was just him at the kitchen table. Diane was nowhere to be seen. He had this thin folder in front of him. As I sat down, he said, "Let's settle up." I was confused. I asked what he meant. He slid the folder across the table. Inside was a typed invoice, literally formatted like a bill. At the top, it said, "To Jason, meals consumed at the Fletcher residence." Below was a detailed list. Every holiday meal. Every birthday. Sunday dinners. Even a weekend barbecue they hosted 5 years ago when Natalie and I were just dating. Each line had a number next to it. $18 per person, $25 for holiday prime rib, $12 for catered sides. At the bottom, he had totaled it up. It came out to $2,346. My hands went cold. I looked at him and asked if he was joking. He said, "This household operates on structure and fairness. You've enjoyed the fruits of this home without contribution. This is about respect." Natalie walked in just then. I turned to her, thinking she'd laugh or say something, anything. But she just looked away. I said her name quietly. She wouldn't meet my eyes. That moment lasted maybe 3 seconds, but I felt it stretch, like something was tearing slowly inside me. I looked down at the bill again. Then I pulled out my wallet. I opened it, took a long look inside, closed it, put it back in my pocket. Then I said, "Don't worry. I'll pay you in full. Just not the way you expect." Carl smirked. That's what people say when they don't have the money. I didn't reply. I got up and left. The ride home was dead quiet. Natalie didn't speak. When we got in, I sat on the edge of the bed and asked her if she knew about the bill. She said yes, that Carl had been talking about it for months, that she told him it was a bad idea, but he insisted. Then she added, "They always did things this way. You just never understood their family." I didn't say much. There wasn't anything to say that wouldn't destroy us both. But I thought about every hour I sat politely at that table. Every time I cleared dishes without being asked. Every time I bit my tongue when Carl said something insulting. I thought about how they never once visited us, never asked about my parents, never even saw the apartment we rented after the wedding. And I thought about that silence from Natalie, her knowing this was coming and still letting it happen. That night, I didn't sleep. 3 weeks later, Carl got a call that sent him storming outside, screaming into his phone, pacing his driveway in the rain, still wearing a silk robe like some kind of king. I watched from a car parked across the street. Not hiding, just sitting there. I told him I'd pay, and I meant it, but not with money. After that night, something shifted between me and Natalie. It wasn't loud. It wasn't even a fight. It was just a slow drifting. We still lived together, still went through the motions. But there was space between us now. Heavy, quiet space. She started staying later at work. Stopped asking me how my day was. She kept her phone close, screen down. She didn't smile anymore. At least not around me. I stopped trying. I didn't ask about her parents. I didn't bring up the bill. I didn't tell her what I was doing behind the scenes. But I started digging. I work in accounting, and I've done some freelance forensic work for small firms, tax prep, audits, the occasional mess cleanup when someone forgot to file right. I know how to read between lines. Carl runs a real estate company. Always bragged about how nobody ever reads the fine print except me. That was his favorite phrase at dinners. Well, I read fine print too. Better than he thinks. I pulled his public business filings. Dug into property records. Took time off work and quietly drove down to the county office to go through physical archives. I found a few flags. Then a few more. There were inconsistencies in the deeds for a couple of his rental homes. Missing disclosures. One property listed under a trust that didn't exist anymore. Then I found the big one. Carl had been quietly renting out a house that was supposed to be under Section 8 housing rules. But the renovations he did, unpermitted. The rent, way above what's allowed. And the kicker? He was getting state reimbursement for tenants who didn't live there anymore. It was fraud. Small time, maybe, but still fraud. And when it involves housing money, the state doesn't play around. I made copies, compiled everything, sent it anonymously to a local housing attorney I knew from my audit circles, someone who had a reason to care. He took it from there, said he'd take a hard look. 2 weeks later, Carl got the call. I guess he didn't take it well. That night, after I saw him screaming in the driveway, I went home and poured a drink. Natalie walked in around 10 p.m. and asked what was wrong with her dad. Apparently, he'd called her 6 times in a panic, saying someone was trying to ruin him. I just shrugged. No idea. She stared at me like she didn't believe me. But she didn't press. The next week, we got invited to her parents' house again. Natalie said they wanted to clear the air. I said no. She went without me. She came back late and quiet. Went straight to bed. The next day, her phone buzzed constantly. Her dad. Her mom. A couple messages from someone labeled M that she tried to hide. I didn't ask. Instead, I made another call. I sent a tip to a local reporter who covered housing code violations and corruption in the city. Gave them the trail to follow. Not the documents. Just enough breadcrumbs to make them curious. Told them someone with influence was stealing from low-income programs. By then, Carl had lawyered up. Word spread that his company was under review. One of his smaller rental properties got flagged by the city for unsafe conditions. A tenant posted a photo online. Mold, cracked drywall, exposed wires. Carl threatened to sue. The post went viral. Natalie grew tense. She started sleeping in the guest room. One night, I came home and she was sitting at the table with a suitcase packed. Said she needed time to think. I said, about what? She said, about everything. She left. A few days later, Diane showed up at my job. I don't know how she found me. She stood in the lobby, looking like a ghost, holding a manila envelope. She asked if we could talk. I said no. She said, you did this. I said, he handed me a bill. I paid it. She dropped the envelope on the floor and left. Inside was a photo of me and Natalie at our wedding and a note. You never belonged. You never will. That was the first time I cried. I never cried when I got the bill. I never cried when Natalie left. But I cried then, not because it hurt, but because I realized how long I had tried to earn a seat at a table that was never meant for me. The thing is, I wasn't finished yet. There were still more truths hiding in Carl's perfect little empire. And I knew where to look next. A week after Diane showed up at my work, I got a letter. Not an email, not a text. A letter, handwritten, careful, almost formal. It was from Carl. He asked to meet me. Alone. Said there were things he needed to get ahead of. He didn't apologize. Just said it would be in my best interest to come. That caught my attention. I didn't reply right away. I held on to the letter for 3 days. Finally, I agreed. We met in a public park. His choice, not mine. Early in the morning, cold, quiet. He looked thinner. Older, even. He didn't waste time. I know it was you, he said. I didn't deny it. He looked at me, dead in the eye, and said, "You think you're clever. You have no idea what you've started." I asked what he meant. That's when he told me about the trust. Not just a fake one used for shady property deals. There was a real trust. For Natalie. He said he'd been planning it for years. That everything, the family business, the assets, even the vacation property in Cape Cod, was supposed to go to her. But now, with the investigations and bad press, the trust might get frozen. If it did, Natalie would lose everything. He blamed me. I just stood there. For a second, I almost believed him. Then I remembered the man who charged me for mashed potatoes. He kept talking. Said Natalie was still in contact with him, still loyal, despite what I'd done. Said she'd been staying with them on and off. Then he said something I didn't expect. She told us about the messages. From your coworker. That stopped me cold. Messages? I pulled out my phone that night and went through every app, every inbox. Then I saw it. My coworker Marissa. She had sent me a few friendly texts over the last couple months. Nothing flirtatious. Just small things. Congrats on the client win. Let's grab coffee and catch up. I never responded in a flirty way. I barely responded at all. But Natalie must have seen them. Or maybe Carl spun it. Either way, they were painting it like I had cheated. That same night, I found out that Natalie had spoken to a lawyer. Not about divorce yet, but about protecting inherited assets from marital disputes. Carl had coached her through it. Quietly shifted some of his properties into her name using a separate LLC. Probably to shield them in case his own accounts got frozen. I couldn't prove it yet, but I could feel it. They were preparing to cut me out completely. Of the marriage, of the money, of everything. I thought I was the one playing chess. But they had been laying down pieces too. Quietly. While I was focused on revenge, they were building escape hatches. The part that stung most was realizing how far gone Natalie really was. She wasn't the same woman I met in college. Or maybe she was, and I never saw it clearly. She had learned from her parents how to stay quiet while someone else did the dirty work. There was one more twist I didn't expect. A former tenant of Carl's emailed me. I don't know how he found me. Maybe through the reporter, maybe a lucky guess. He said he recognized Carl's name in a news article and wanted to share something. He said Carl used to rent to undocumented workers. Packed 5 or 6 people into a 2-bedroom house. Charged them cash. No leases. No records. When one of the tenants complained about the plumbing, Carl threatened to report them. The tenant had proof, photos, even a recorded voicemail. He said he never went public because he was scared. He wasn't scared anymore. We talked on the phone for almost an hour. He gave me more names. People who had left quietly. People who still lived in fear of Carl. It was bigger than I thought. This wasn't just about a petty dinner bill anymore. Carl had built an empire on fear, silence, and control. And now that silence was cracking. The final blow didn't come from me. It came from the very system Carl thought he had mastered. The tenant I spoke to? His name was Mateo. After our talk, he connected with 3 others who'd lived in Carl's properties. I put them in touch with the reporter. The reporter brought in a housing advocate. Suddenly, Carl wasn't just under quiet review. He was under investigation by the city, the IRS, and the housing authority. The news broke 2 weeks later. It was everywhere. Local real estate mogul accused of exploiting undocumented tenants, defrauding state funds, falsifying housing records. Carl's photo was plastered on every screen. That smug, sharp suit and forced smile. They even got a copy of one of his fake invoices, just like the one he gave me. The headline under it read, "This man sent his son-in-law a dinner bill. Now he's paying a bigger price." I didn't leak that part. Someone else did. Maybe the reporter. Maybe Natalie. Because that's the thing, she finally cracked too. After the second wave of news, her name was pulled into it. Those LLCs? They had her signature. The Cape Cod property? Traced directly to her trust account. For the first time, Carl's poison touched her too. She came back to the apartment crying. She hadn't done that in years. I didn't gloat. I just listened. She said, I didn't know how deep it went. I nodded, but I didn't say, it's okay, because it wasn't. I asked if she ever truly believed I was cheating. She said no. I just wanted a way out before you hurt me first. That one stayed with me. She left again the next day. For good this time. We divorced 2 months later. Clean, quiet. No alimony. No fights. She walked away with the clothes she came in with. I didn't take anything from her. I didn't need to. Carl's company folded by the end of the year. He was forced to sell multiple properties to pay fines and legal bills. Several tenants sued. One woman, a single mother he evicted during the winter without notice, won a six-figure settlement. Carl was banned from running any housing business in the state. His name was ruined. Diane. She disappeared from public view. Word was, she moved in with a sister in Arizona. Her last post online was a photo of a Bible verse, months old now. Natalie works at a bookstore now. I heard from a friend that she cut ties with both her parents. Me? I moved to a smaller city. Got a quiet job at a nonprofit. I do accounting for places that help real people, low-income families, shelters, food banks. I don't make as much money, but I sleep better. Sometimes I think about that dinner table. Carl sliding that bill toward me like I was less than him. Natalie looking down, silent. And then I think about Mateo. About the voicemail he played me. Carl threatening to report him, telling him to shut his mouth and be grateful. Carl thought that fear would last forever. But fear breaks. When you stand up. When you stop asking for a seat and build your own table. I didn't burn his house down. I just opened all the windows and let the truth blow through. That was how I paid him back. In full. After finding my name on those forged loan documents, something in me snapped into place. I stopped calling it revenge. I started calling it survival. Carl hadn't just insulted me with that dinner bill. He had investigated me, forged my name, tried to tie me to criminal documents. And Natalie, my wife, sat beside him, knowing who he was, and let it happen. That wasn't marriage. That was betrayal. My lawyer worked fast. We collected everything. The fake signatures, the scanned documents, my proof of addresses during those years. Every discrepancy. We didn't send it to the DA yet. We sent it to Carl's biggest bank. The same one he'd been using for years for his property investments. Within a month, they froze 3 of his commercial accounts for internal fraud review. One of his loans was called in early. He didn't have enough liquidity to cover it. A foreclosure notice was posted on 2 of his rental units. That was when the unraveling started. The housing department finished their investigation. Carl was banned from owning or managing rental properties in the state for at least 10 years. The IRS opened a separate audit. Turns out those trust transfers to Natalie weren't filed properly. The accountant Carl used tried to fix it, but the damage was done. Carl owed back taxes. Natalie's trust was frozen. Natalie tried to call me. I didn't answer. Instead, I mailed her a copy of the forged documents with my name on them. I highlighted the false address. On the back, I wrote one sentence. This is who you protected. She didn't call again. 3 weeks later, I got a knock on my apartment door. It was Diane. Her makeup was gone. Her hair was gray now, not blonde. No pearls. Just a plain coat, 2 sizes too big. She handed me a small photo. It was me and Natalie at our wedding. One of the few moments where I looked happy. Then she said, "He used us all." I didn't say anything. She started crying. Not loud, not dramatic, just quiet tears that made her shoulders shake. Then she said something I didn't expect. "I'm divorcing him." I asked why she was telling me. She said, "Because I stayed silent. Because I sat next to him when he humiliated you. And you still pulled us all out into the light." I didn't forgive her, but I believed her. Carl? He ended up in court. The city sued for housing violations. A few tenants sued for damages. Mateo won his case. He got enough to move into a clean, safe apartment with his cousin. He emailed me a photo of their new place, with a note, "We're safe now. Thanks to you." Carl lost almost everything. His company folded. His assets got sold off to pay fines and lawsuits. Even the Cape Cod property. Diane got the house in the divorce. Carl now rents an apartment under a different name in a small town 3 hours away. No more speaking gigs. No more dinner parties. The man who once charged me $18 for mashed potatoes now lives on government retirement checks. I visited my father after everything was over. We sat on his porch in silence for a long time. Then he said, "You did good, kid." That was the closest thing to "I'm proud of you" I ever got. But it was enough. I still think about Natalie sometimes. I wonder if she ever realized what she lost. I didn't burn bridges. I just stopped crossing them. And I built something better on the other side.